In this episode, we discuss how IIT campuses have changed 6 years after the universities implemented a 20% quota for women. We also take a look at the ongoing Sheesh Mahal controversy between the AAP and the BJP. But first, we talk about the murder of journalist Mukesh Chandrakar. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last Friday, the body of the 32-year-old journalist Mukesh Chandrakar was found inside a septic tank a day after he went missing in Chhattisgarh's Bijapur district. According to the police, Chandrakar, who freelanced for several prominent media houses and ran a YouTube channel, was allegedly murdered by two men, which included his cousin and childhood best friend Suresh Chandrakar. The case has once again raised concerns about the safety of journalists in the country, especially those who work in sensitive areas. To learn more about the case and the reactions it has prompted, we speak to the Indian Express's Jayprakash Naidu. Jayprakash, can you first talk a bit about who Mukesh Chandrakar was and the kind of work he was involved in?
So Mukesh was a 32-year-old freelance journalist based in Bijapur, which is the worst Maoist affected district among the 7 districts which form the Bastar region in Chhattisgarh. So he was among the most popular reporters from Bastar region because of his innumerable ground reports on Naxal encounters, alleged fake encounters, interviews of Naxal leaders, or reporting from Naxal camps about, the Jantana Sarkar meets that they have, or these kangaroo courts that they have. So he used to report from there, and these are like in remote villages about 100-150 kilometers inside the deep forests.
80 के दशक से बस्तर में माओवाद काबिज है। माओवादियों की कार्यशैली, उनका अपना संविधान, उनका अपना कानून है। माओवादी जब भी किसी का अपहरण करते हैं तो उसे जन अदालत में सजा दी जाती है। जन अदालत मतलब जनता की अदालत, जहां पे पैरवी जनता ही करती है, सुनवाई भी जनता ही करती है। ऐसे में
So he was also, making a lot of ground reports on poor infrastructure, health, education, and among other Adivasi issues. So this had made him popular among the Adivasis. And not just this, in the age of internet, he came up with his own YouTube channel named Bastar Junction. This was in 2021. And in this 2-3 years, he has made 1.68 lakh subscribers, and he has got 2.9 crore views, making 486 videos.
नमस्कार, मैं मुकेश चंद्राकर हूं और आप बस्तर जंक्शन देखना शुरू कर चुके हैं। इस वक्त मैं अबूझमाड़ के जंगलों में हूं। जंगलों में क्यों हूं, ये कहानी पहले सुन लीजिएगा। दरअसल 27
And Jayprakash, now his body was found on Friday. Tell us, what do we know about what led to his murder?
So he was murdered on January 1 by two men. One was his cousin Ritesh Chandrakar, who was also his best friend and childhood friend, and another was a local supervisor. So the two had dinner that night, after which a heated argument took place between them, and Ritesh and the supervisor, they beat him to death with an iron rod, and later they tried to dispose of his body by putting it in a septic tank and covered it with concrete. So police have said that Ritesh was livid with Mukesh, and before murdering him, he had said that, this is the exact words of Ritesh, "You are related to me, but instead of helping us, you are creating hindrances in our work." So police did not make clear what was the work Ritesh was talking about, but as of now we know it is related to Suresh Chandrakar, who's another cousin of Mukesh, and he's a big road contractor in Bijapur.
Right, and although the police are not exactly talking about it, but there was a particular story that Mukesh reported on that is now being linked to his murder. Can you tell us what that story was?
Yeah, so this story is related to Mukesh's cousin Suresh Chandrakar. As I said, he's a big contractor in Bijapur, and Suresh was awarded a road contract work in 2015. It was a 32.40 kilometer road in Bijapur, which was part of a 52.40 kilometer road in Bijapur. So Suresh had completed some 24.90 kilometers of the road and was paid 116 crore for it. Remaining work was going on. So this is when Mukesh worked on a story for NDTV, which was published on December 25 last month, that highlighted the poor condition of this very road, which led to an inquiry against his own cousin Suresh. And also, while all this was going on, another fact that came up was the entire road's expense had shot up from rupees 73 crores in 2010 to rupees 188.7 crore in 2021. So the police have alleged that after Mukesh was murdered by two men, Ritesh and the supervisor, it was two more men who is Suresh, the contractor, and Suresh's brother Dinesh, who helped them to dispose of the body, to dispose of the murder weapon, which was an iron rod, and to dispose Mukesh's phone.
And Jay, could you talk about what action has the police taken in the matter so far?
All four have been arrested, the supervisor and the three cousins, that is Ritesh, Suresh and Dinesh. And Suresh's 3 bank accounts have been frozen because this matter attracted so much of public attention. Chief Minister Vishnudev Sai, he asked the district administration to crack down on all the illegal construction made by Suresh, and a construction plant which was built on forest property spread across 3 to 4 acres of land was razed a day after the arrest. And Home Minister Vijay Sharma also made an announcement that all road construction contract given to Suresh and will be inspected to see if he has done the work properly or not.
And maybe we can talk a bit about Mukesh himself. Like you mentioned, he was a popular journalist from the area. His YouTube channel had also been very successful. Could you talk about what led him to become a journalist?
So, it's very important to understand how Mukesh's childhood went. Growing up as a child in Basaguda, which is a highly affected Naxal area, Mukesh was always sensitive towards tribals. He had to leave his home along with other tribals in mid-2000s during the Salwa Judum movement, when villagers took up arms against Maoists, leading to mass displacement in Bastar. So Mukesh and his mother and his brother were living in a shelter provided by the government. And Mukesh lost his father in his childhood, and then in 2013 he lost his mother to cancer, and he really didn't have money to pay for the expenses. And then again he used to live on rent. So he was watching all the issues of Adivasis from very closely, and that kind of made him passionate about their issues. And then when his brother started freelancing for some news channels, he also tagged along and followed in his footsteps.
And so, considering the kind of stories he did and how sensitively he dealt with some of these issues, how was he perceived by his peers and his community?
Yeah, so he has been helping a lot of journalists from national media, and this is why he has also become best friends with them. Now, this also includes 3 journalists from our own newspaper who worked here before me. So Mukesh was more of a friend to all 3 of them, and he always helped them, whether it was providing local contacts or taking them to the encounter spots which are deep inside the jungles with no roads, and fear of a ID blast and traps always looms large. So he himself had received a threat from Naxalites when he talked about Naxals destroying public property. He also had become a sore in the eyes of government as he vehemently and consistently raised the voices of this voiceless Adivasis, a fact which is evident in his YouTube videos. So his friends, they talk very greatly of him because they know that we will do our story and then come back home, but he's the one who will be living there. And I guess that's what we have seen now, right?
And Jay, what are the kind of reactions that his killing has now prompted by the national media and also those in Bastar?
So the Home Minister Vijay Sharma had taken a press conference, and it was a heated press conference where journalists were throwing all sorts of questions at him. So he, in the press conference, announced a special investigation team to probe the entire case, and issues of other journalists getting threatened was also discussed there.
तुरंत ही इस पर कार्यवाही करते हुए IPS मयंक गुर्जर अतिरिक्त पुलिस अधीक्षक हैं बीजापुर में, उनके नेतृत्व में 11 सदस्यीय टीम बना करके SIT का गठन करके और इस प्रकरण की पूरी जांच शुद्धता से की जाएगी, यह भी निर्णय हो गया है। टीम की घोषणा हो गई है। कांग्रेस नेता सुरेश चंद्रकर.
Then all journalists, they united in Raipur, which is a rare thing, and they took out a march from the press club to the governor house, and they also spoke. They all gave speeches on how unsafe journalists are today, and at the governor house also they gave slogans, and then they submitted a memorandum to safeguard journalists and to ensure strict punishment is given to the murder accused.
Right, and besides this, one thing we should mention is that the State Home Minister Vijay Sharma, he said that Suresh Chandrakar is a Congress leader. Now, this charge has been denied by the Congress party. In fact, the party says that Suresh actually joined the BJP in December. But leaving that aside, the concern you talk about has been there for some time now. For years, really, especially for journalists who work in sensitive areas or who do sensitive stories. So could you talk about that a bit and the threat that journalists face today?
See, Mukesh's death shows how fearless and dangerous these antisocial elements can be, even towards their own relative. So I would say this alleged accused must get stringent punishment for the crime they have committed, so that a strong message is sent in the society, and police must also find out if his murder was part of a larger conspiracy. At least these things must be done.
And next we talk about IITs, the country's most prestigious institutions for higher education. Now, 6 years ago, these autonomous public universities implemented a 20% quota for women. This was done under the female supernumerary scheme.
So basically, it's not a reservation in the already existing seats in the IIT, but the IITs have added 20% to its already existing number, so that this 20% can increase and push more women into IITs.
That's the Indian Express's Vidheesha Kuntamalla, who reports on education for the paper.
So this scheme had started in 2018 based on the recommendations by a committee led by then IIT Mandi director Timothy Gonsalves. And the committee proposed the supernumerary quota and called it as the required slight push to address the gender imbalance across IITs, because IITs have always been traditionally very male-dominated spaces, because STEM has always been looked at as a subject which was pursued by men more than women. I mean, of course, a lot of people have noticed the disproportionately low numbers females compared to men, which is why the quota was created in the first place. And at the time, it did spark discussions over whether it was necessary or fair, with some viewing it as a progressive step towards inclusivity and others questioning if it would compromise the meritocracy of the IITs.
The quota, of course, was implemented in the end. And now that it has been 6 years, Vidheesha tried to find out the extent to which things have actually changed for these campuses. In this segment, we speak to her about what she found out. So Vidheesha, first tell us, how many more women are there in IITs across the country right now that this scheme has been in place for some time?
So we had applied for an RTI and we did ask for data from all 23 IITs, including the first generation and the new IITs. I think it was only Bhubaneswar and Patna which did not have the compiled data, so they couldn't provide it to us. But the rest of the 21 IITs had provided numbers for increase in women. I mean, the female composition of each institute, and this increase can be seen everywhere. But it is more notably in the first generation IITs because they have been there for longer. So we focused mainly on the first generation so that we can draw a contrast easily, because the new generation IITs just came up. Like when the scheme kicked in, they must have just started off. So, for instance, IIT Kanpur, which is one of the seven first-generation IITs. So, IIT Kanpur was the last to hit this 20% mark compared to the other IITs. But it saw the most percentage of increase. Like the number of women rose from 908 in 2017. That is before the scheme had kicked in. The scheme kicked in 2018. So after that, in 2024, the number went up to 2,124 women in the campus. So that's like a 133% increase. Similarly, even Roorkee saw a 76% increase as the number of women went up from about 1,400 to 2,600 in 2024.
Yeah, and besides this, you write that Delhi and Bombay were actually two places that were already meeting that 20% criteria even before the scheme kicked in, partly because these are two prime metropolitan cities. But besides them, even newer IITs, like you said, have now seen an increase in the number of women. Can you talk about the kind of changes the campuses made after the scheme was implemented, knowing that there would be more women now?
So obviously, spaces infrastructurally have changed. When I was speaking to alumni of each of these institutions, some people studied in the 80s, in the 90s. So they again came back as professors in the same institutions. So they would be like literally one or two girls in the class. Like you could visibly see that there's no women across campuses. So There were many interesting anecdotes. Like, there was one female professor who told me that there used to be no washroom in the campus for females because there were no women. So that has changed. But the number of washrooms obviously has gone up. They had to invest in that infrastructurally. Hostels, for instance, because women were in such small numbers, women's hostels were always located farther from the activity centers of the institute. Men's hostels were always closer to the academic blocks. So that has changed. Like, it's beautiful. Even when you go to IIT Delhi now, you can see that shift has happened. Like, more boys' hostels have been converted into girls' hostels, and women are being brought closer towards the centers where a lot of activities take place and a lot of life of the campus revolves.
And has there also been a change in perspective, especially when it comes to the male professors? Tell us what some of the faculty members told you in that regard.
So I think the enactment of POSH guidelines and gender sensitivity programs that are coming up in IITs with more women walking in are also teaching male professors to sort of mend their ways of interacting with students in IITs. Like, there were many female professors who told me that there are many male professors on this campus who did not even know that commenting on a girl's clothes was offensive. They did not know that, such comments should not be passed. So creating sensitivity that way in how you approach the student. And obviously, to create a comfortable environment, there were many male professors who also told us that, we now call students in pairs. If it's two female students, if I'm a supervisor of female student, I call them in pairs. I meet them in labs. I make sure I don't meet them in my office because it might not be a comfortable environment. I don't close my office's door anymore. I keep it open if a woman walks in. So I think all of this is sort of starting to change. There's very less victim blaming now when a woman says that, I've been sexually harassed. Earlier, it was quite regressive in these spaces, right, where you sort of hold the woman accountable.
And do you think this has happened because there are just more number of women on the campus? Or has that happened through these gender sensitivity trainings?
I think with more women flowing in, the institutes also felt responsible, felt compelled to bring all these cells into place to deal with creating an healthy environment for women students. So yeah, definitely that increase of more women students walking in has forced these institutions to sort of put these sensitivity programs and gender cells in place. That is there for sure. But there is still issues like, for instance, at IIT Kanpur, when I was talking to a few students, they said that last year in 2018 when the scheme kicked in, to accommodate female students, they repurposed the ground, the open sports area. They repurposed that and they just built a girls' hostel over there. And then they were like, why are you repurposing our sports facilities? We are also as equal as male students, right? Even we want to use our sports facilities. So it's just things like these which still are under the debate. Even the gender cell head at IIT Kanpur had also mentioned this, that even today, no matter how much awareness and push is being made in the campuses, not all women come up or speak up against, harassment, especially when there is a power dynamic involved, if it's a professor or a student. So yeah, these are the challenges which still are in place, and also a lot of stereotype, especially in departments like civil engineering and mechanical, where women are still very less because these have always been viewed as male-dominated departments. So there was this PhD student I was talking to who was in the civil engineering department. She was the only girl because it's PhD, obviously. I'm sure very less women must be taking it up. She was the only woman, and she was like, because we come from social backgrounds where there is this stereotype which is not being broken, that I cannot bond with a male senior. So that networking is being limited. So that's still there.
And also, Vidheesha, are these women subjected to the kind of comments that a lot of people who get into institutions with the help of quota face, that you're not here because of merit, you're here because of a quota?
So I did hear a few professors while reporting on the study say that, it is difficult because these guys come through a supernumerary quota. They're not as smart as the ones who get in through merit. But when I asked the students about this kind of discrimination on campus, especially at IIT Delhi, the students have mentioned that it's not as bad as caste discrimination. So I don't think it exists on a huge scale that, oh, you came through a female quota than someone coming in through a caste quota.
And was there anything else that particularly stood out to you in your conversations with the students and the faculty?
I think security. I feel like as soon as more women walk into your campus, you are compelled to feel like you need to make it a more secure space. So, for instance, IIT Roorkee has invested about 6 crores in security cameras since the scheme has kicked in. So, they have packed up their entire campus with 350 cameras. But what also stood out for me was, so there's this professor, her name's Ravinder Kaur, and she's been researching on women in STEM across the country. And she's mentioned this very interesting aspect from her research that even though women enter IITs in this scheme at lower JEE scores, joint entrance examination scores, they end up passing out with a higher pointer than men by the end of 4 years. So what she thinks, what her research sort of is looking at is that the nature of the joint entrance examination itself is male dominated. Like a male student is probably reacting to a multiple choice question and negative marking differently than a female student is. So I think that was a very interesting aspect that, despite entering at lower scores, if someone's exiting at higher pointers than the male students, I think tweaking the national examination might be something that should be considered as a conversation. I think that research of her and that aspect was very interesting.
And in the end, we talk about the Sheesh Mahal controversy. With the Delhi Assembly elections scheduled for the 5th of February, tensions between the Aam Aadmi Party and the Bharatiya Janata Party have intensified. Last Friday, during the launch of the BJP's campaign in Delhi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi targeted AAP chief Arvind Kejriwal, saying that like the former Delhi chief minister, he could have built a Sheesh Mahal for himself, but instead chose to give people, especially the poor, a home of their own. The term Sheesh Mahal is the BJP's name for the Delhi Chief Minister's house that was renovated when Kejriwal was the Chief Minister. The BJP has alleged that crores were spent on the property's renovation even as people living in unauthorized colonies were neglected.
मैं भी कोई शीश महल बना सकता था, लेकिन मेरे लिए तो मेरे देशवासियों को पक्का घर मिले, यही एक सपना था.
Now, a day after his remarks, Union Home Minister Amit Shah also made similar comments, stating that the people of Delhi were demanding accountability for such lavish spending.
एक बड़ा 45 करोड़ का शीश महल उन्होंने अपने रहने के लिए, जो राजनीति में आए तब कहते थे हम सरकारी गाड़ी नहीं लेंगे, सरकारी बंगलो नहीं लेंगे, एक नए प्रकार की राजनीति का आगाज करेंगे. एक बंगलो से पेट नहीं भरा, 2 बंगलों से पेट नहीं भरा, 3 बंगलों से पेट नहीं भरा, 4 बंगलों से पेट नहीं भरा, 50,000 गज एक शीश महल बनाया दिल्ली वासियों के 45 करोड़ के खर्चे से. और केजरीवाल जी आपको इसका हिसाब देना पड़ेगा. दिल्ली की
In response to these allegations, Kejriwal hit back last week, saying that someone who lives in a 2,700 crore house, whose travel expenses exceed 8,400 crore, and who wears a suit worth over 10 lakh has no right to comment on a Sheesh Mahal.
2700 करोड़ रुपए का अपने लिए घर बनाने वाला, 8400 करोड़ रुपए के हवाई जहाज में घूमने वाला, 10 लाख रुपए के सूट पहनने वाला व्यक्ति, उसके मुंह से शीश महल की बातें अच्छी नहीं लगती.
Kejriwal further accused the BJP of being enemies of the poor, claiming that the party aims to demolish all slums in Delhi by 2030, forcing residents to live in flats under inhumane conditions. The tensions between the two parties escalated yesterday when AAP leaders Saurabh Bhardwaj and Sanjay Singh were blocked by police from entering the official chief minister's residence. The two had invited the media to tour the property to counter the BJP's claims.
आपने ताला लगाया है ना, पीछे हो जाओगे तो सबका बनेगा. आपने ताला लगाया वहाँ पे ना, आपका ताला है ना, सोच लो आपका ताला है. वहाँ पे कहा जा रहा है, बीजेपी वाले कह रहे हैं वहाँ स्विमिंग पूल है, सोने का टॉयलेट है, मिनी बार है. देखा तुमने? देखा है? नई जानकारी तो खोल के दिखाओ ना. तुम्हारे मिनिस्टर आए वो देखना चाहते हैं, इनको दिखाओ.
Later, Bhardwaj and Singh staged a dharna near the Prime Minister's residence but were prevented from doing so by the security. The AAP leaders questioned why the Prime Minister's 2,700 crore rupees residence wasn't being examined if the Chief Minister's house was under scrutiny. Meanwhile, the Sheesh Mahal allegations have now become a central point of BJP's attack against the Aam Aadmi Party. Its leaders now plan to approach voters in all 70 constituencies with a model replicating the residence. You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.